Very, very big indeed. It's one to look forward to this weekend. Nadem, obviously your colours are light blue ahead of this game.
There's a lot of blue here, to be honest. There's a lot of blue here, and I'm here for it, yeah.
But look, we're looking ahead to this game, and we've had some big games already so far this season. But last season's Premier League champions against the season before Premier League champions, first against second, it's huge. Yeah,
do you know what it is? It is a huge game, and it's good to sort of get a feel for how the Premier League looks at this moment in time. But then there is also that sense of reality in the fact that it's the first weekend in October. You know, you're not going to win or lose the title based on this game here. But like I say, it feels like you could make somewhat of a statement, because I think, for example, Man City did against Chelsea, not necessarily because of the result, but the performance. And I think that's going to be key. If City can go to Anfield and put on some sort of performance, and maybe if Liverpool can do the same against City, then I think that will be spoken about in some ways, probably more than the result.
For you, Andrew, if you were going into a season at this early stage, as Nadem says, you've got your eyes on the title, you're up against one of your title challengers, what would you be thinking as a player? How would you be approaching it?
I think as a player, you're looking at it this way, you know, it's a marker. If you go to Anfield and you get a positive result, you're basically saying to Liverpool, look, we're here to win this. And you're putting down a marker now. Yeah, it's October, first week in October, but that's what you can do wherever you go. If you're playing amongst the top 4 teams, you've got to put down a marker wherever you play. I think if Manchester City go there at the weekend, get a win, and in Liverpool, no. You know, we have to go to the Etihad later on this season and try and gain those 3 points back. Otherwise, if they continue this form, they're going to have a great chance of winning the Premier League.
In terms of working out which way this one's going to go, the form, pretty much everybody in the league has been... Patchy's probably a bit rude, but variable is probably a better word.
Yeah, I'd say so, because going into last weekend, Liverpool looked so defensively strong. They'd only conceded once in 5 games, and everyone thought they'd sweep Brentford aside, with all due respect to Brentford. And again, if you look at the Chelsea-City game, all of the pre-match talk, certainly from my industry, was that Chelsea had the offensive power. They had Lukaku, who was scoring goals for fun, and they had the supply line for him. And City hadn't got Kane, and so they were going to struggle for goals. But ironically, no shot on target for Chelsea in the whole match, and City should have won by 3 or 4. So it's hard to call this one, because the same rules apply. Liverpool have got all the offensive power, they're defensively very, very strong, but City know how to find a way to win. I think you can put the PSG result to one side. I mean, that's interplanetary.
Because the performance was so good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as far as this is concerned, the Premier League is concerned, Pep knows how to find a way to win.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the form of both sides coming into this one, because you can look at the Champions League results. Liverpool 5-1 winners against Porto, but it's a place where they traditionally have had excellent scorelines. Manchester City, yes, they lost 2-0 against PSG, but the performance was there. And then you look back to their previous Premier League games where Liverpool played out that 3-3 draw against Brentford and Manchester City got that significant win against Chelsea. Does that play into this weekend's game, do you think?
I think it's tough to jump on something that Darren said before. Pep does tend to find ways to win, but it tends to be just not at Anfield. that's the thing. But it's interesting, isn't it? It's very interesting. It is very, very tough to call, especially at this early stage, because you see Liverpool dominate Porto. But then you see the opposite, say, for City. I thought in times they controlled the game very well against Paris Saint-Germain, but they lost 2-0.
Nadem, what do you prefer to watch, Ben? Do you prefer to watch a good defensive performance or a good offensive performance?
For me personally...
As an ex-defender?
I think the foundation is a good defensive one, but not one that necessarily starts at the back. Because one thing which I saw in that Chelsea game, for example, was the fact that the pressing was so good from high that the people at the back were facing a different type of challenge, because if it wasn't there, into Lukaku, you get more runners from it. So, you know, if they press high, you know, not to like blow gas or blow air smoke up into attackers, whatever's, but I always say to attackers, the game is dependent on you. You score your goals, but then if you also defend well, it makes the game easier for me back where I am. The game it is a two-way game.
Yeah, of course.
You know, if you have people who only want to play it one way, then it makes it harder for your team. But when you have a front line that presses as well as City do, that Liverpool have done in the past, not only will they be rewarded by not having to defend deeper for longer, but they'll get more chances up in key areas. So I think that's key for me. But then going into this game, I thought City had a good performance against Paris Saint-Germain, and I think Pep is going to instill the mindset into the players whereby the results tend to be a product of the performance more often than not. And if they continue to play well, they will find more positive results. The key difference on Tuesday was the fact they didn't have Lionel Messi, you know, and that Lionel Messi is pretty much the ultimate blessing that you can have on a field, wearing your kit at any time. So I think they'll be positive. They defended well in that game. They attacked reasonably well in that game. Like, Donnarumma was one of the best players for PSG. So, but it's tough to call because it's Anfield, and as somebody who supports Man City, you know, there've been a lot of years of like, oh, they're playing Liverpool at Anfield this weekend. I'll give that one a miss because we know what's going to happen next year.
That's it, yeah. A little bit of tempting fate, I think, there from Nadim. But the point that you were both raising there about that defensive unit as a team is an interesting one, because both managers have talked about that in the past, Guardiola and Klopp, because we single out individual defenders. We look at both goalkeepers. In fact, we look at both goalkeepers as starting attacks as well, so it works both ways. But in terms of that, it's going to be really interesting to see that approach and the way it's matched up, because until the Brentford game, Liverpool had only conceded one. City have only conceded one so far in the Premier League as well. But it's just that their defence aren't facing that many shots.
They're not. And like Nadim touched on there, is that down to the closing down for the boys up front? Because that's where it all starts. It all starts for the boys up front. And when we talk about good defending, because the boys up front have made it easier for the boys at the back. You know, and that's what marries itself together. And that's what good teams do. You know, they all work for each another, get themselves in the right position to try and make it easier for each another. So when you look at Manchester City's performance last week against Chelsea, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Midweek, I thought they played extremely well as well. I thought it was fantastic. We touched on it there. The one blessing they didn't have was Messi. And if they had him, you know, the result most probably would have been a different result. But like I said, I think for me personally, I enjoy watching both teams. The way they attack, the way they defend, and the way they score goals. So I'm really looking forward to it. And if it goes by some of the results we've had in previous years, it's going to be a real good game.
Yeah, it potentially could be not just a significant game come the end of the season, but it also could be one that's really entertaining to watch as well.
Yeah, it could be entertaining to watch, because I think both teams have got that they're wedded to a way of playing that they don't compromise on. So City will impose themselves on you the same way, home or away. Liverpool will do the same thing. And I remember when Klopp first arrived and he had this style of football that he wanted to play, and some of the traditionalists, if you like, would say, oh, well, we play like that. We've played like that for years. But they didn't really play with that kind of precision, commitment, discipline. I remember watching Liverpool play at Bournemouth once. I remember seeing, and I remember to this day, Salah just sprinting 70 yards to get back and tackle the left back. And I remember writing that in my match report, because that symbolised the commitment of Klopp's players. So I totally agree when the chaps say the offensive players make it easier for the defensive players to play. And a feature of that win for PSG over City in midweek was Neymar and Mbappe doing their defensive duties for once. Because beforehand, I think they'd only had 2 clean sheets all season. And a big reason for that was that they were playing as individuals. But this was a game where they played as a team and they were able to get the win. And I think it's a hard game to call because they both do play as a team. I think it'll be a draw.
I was like,
it's a hard game to call. I think it'll be a draw.
No, in terms of one winning or the other winning.
It's hard to put yourself in either camp very, very firmly in that one.
Cool.
But you look at the attacking players, and you look at the way that Brentford approached that game against Liverpool. In some ways, that game was a bit of an anomaly on both sides. It was just one of those games. But there are ways you could look at it, and those numbers in the box, like up against Liverpool's defence, cause them all kinds of problems. They're not used to that. So, is that look? City aren't going to change drastically in order to play against Liverpool, because what they're doing is working just fine.
Yes.
But might they take something from that, do you think?
I think in terms of City's style of play, like as we all know here, it's a particular thing. But the difference is from when they played against PSG, when they played against Chelsea, is that I think Liverpool, if they need to, they'll bypass midfield, because they have people who are very willing runners down channels and stuff like this. Say, for example, if Henderson comes short, he's always looking for like a key pass and stuff like this. So if you can play it 10 yards, you can play it 10 yards. But if it needs to be a 40-yard pass that's more dynamic, they'll do that. So some of this sort of like controlling midfield and trying to go for a high press, you could skip a lot of City's players if you have people who are testing something that is ultimately different. But City overall, especially from what I saw of them last season, they're quite good at sort of figuring out what is key, what the strength of the opposition is, and they don't try and play into it. Whether it was times like last year, I think in the home game they had where Spurs were great on the break, So every time there was a turnover, they'd have 3 or 4 players swarm the guy on the ball and maybe commit a tactical foul or something like this. So you take away their strength, and now you're forced in Spurs to try and break you down, which isn't really Spurs' strength at this moment in time, you'd say. So it's going to be, it's going to be interesting, but it's different. Like, even though the 3 games against top sides that they've had this week, this one is different because Liverpool can sort of do you in different ways. But one thing that you know is going to be high intensity. Yeah. It's going to be like, you need to be mentally ready to be going out on that pitch and feeling uncomfortable, because you're not going to go up against a team who will insist on continually playing it 5 yards at a time. And
Liverpool always got runners.
Always
got that third man going.
And that's the key strength that they have. And it's, for me, it's like why people like Salah and Mane and so on have been so significant for them across the years, because they fall into that, they fit into that. That is Liverpool. And that's why I think up until the Burnley game last year, they'd not lost at home for 68
games. Interesting, in our industry, when we're setting out ahead of the game and we're devoting, how much are we going to give this in the newspapers? What are we going to devote this page and that page to? And sometimes we do what we call key battles, who will come up against who. So I don't know whether it's Cancelo up against Mane, for argument's sake. But when you look at these two teams, there are key battles all over the pitch. There are, top players, leaders, guys who are able to influence the game in every single position. So it's going to be hard to make a call. Anyone can be the match winner, and obviously there are the obvious ones like a Gabriel Jesus and a Mo Salah. But in terms of the entire team, you're right, they're all leaders in the team. So you know that you're dealing with a group of players who are experienced in a fixture, used to the intensity, used to the pressure, and are able to, in some way, affect the game.
It's interesting as well when you talk about bypassing Manchester City's midfield, because one of Liverpool's most played passes this season is Virgil van Dijk out to the left-hand side. And they use it so often, and that's maybe a way that they can that's maybe why the battle between Cancelo and Mane is the one that sprung to mind.
Yeah, because that is the way, you beat the high press. People might, that's long ball football. No, it's not long ball football. I mean, that's tactical football. If you want to cut out their midfield, they're going to press you. You hit a diag and you're out. That cuts out their midfield, and then Man City need to get back into position. Liverpool on the attack. And that's what you have to do. But the players all have the intelligence to do that. They try their best not to make silly passes, but they get themselves in certain positions, they know what pass they're looking for, and then they go from there.
Andy, Leicester played that pass, didn't they, a lot in their title winning season?
Yeah.
Centre-half. Yeah. And they had their defenders running back to goal because Vardy would get in behind so often.
And as well, this might sound really obvious, but it's not really something that's spoken about. When you come up against a side that's really set in its way with its structure and so on and so forth, the one time when you're not in your structure is when you're chasing the ball over the top.
Yes.
Because you have no idea where anybody is, and you're trying to deal with the task that's in front of you that's running towards your goal.
But as we watch modern day football now, I watch the game naturally as a centre forward, and to see a centre forward running behind now is like, I can't do that. the only person I see do that is Vardy.
Yeah.
And everyone else, that's dirty work. I'll be tired.
That's key. That is key.
There you go.
That is key. When you look at Liverpool and Man City, the last 2 Premier League winners, and they've been Premier League winners for the last 4 seasons, I believe, they're constantly testing the back line.
You have to.
And if the ball can be played to them by anybody on the field, but sometimes the mere fact that they're pulling on someone's shoulder create space for somebody else.
Yeah.
If somebody goes long, somebody can come short. But if everybody's coming short, the game's always going to be in the front of the opposition. And when it's like that, I'll be honest, those games are far easier than when you continually having to think, is it this time, is it this time, is it this time?
It's interesting when you talk about watching the game as a centre forward, because Liverpool's front line have been prolific this season, particularly over the last few games. I mean, there were 2s and 3s before that, but over their last few games, over the last 6, they've scored at least 3 goals in each of them. And yes, there was the 3-3 against Brentford in the middle of all of that, but they just seem to have, I don't know if it's maybe closer to early days of Klopp, that kind of slightly, I don't want to say gung-ho, because that feels like there's no control over it, but it's sort of a little bit closer to that organised chaos that we saw.
Listen, I've been banging on about how they're back to full defensive strength, and I think the guys will score. It's always easier to score goals when you've got that good, sound, solid defensive base.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm looking at the boys at the front. Yeah, they've got their mojos back. Definitely. Mane looks like, I've got my ball. I got my mojo back this season. I want to score goals. Yeah, I'm gonna miss a few, but I'm gonna get myself in the right areas. Firmino looks like he's got the bit between his teeth again, and Salah, I think he's gone to the next level. I don't know what to even say about that guy. The next level, he just does it week in, week out, consistent, score goals, creates chances, creates havoc, and then he comes off, he's got himself a brace. And you turn around and say to yourself, he could have got himself a hat-trick there. I think he's phenomenal at the moment.
Can I ask this? You played with Dwight Yorke, and when you got the ball, you would try to find Yorkie. Yorkie would try to find you. Sometimes I don't see that between Mane and Salah. Sometimes I see one or other go for something that you think that's impossible. Now, if you pull it off, it was the right decision. But sometimes they don't pull it off. And I just think, clearly he's got 100 goals now. But he could have so many more if he had that kind of understanding.
I'll let you take this one.
Yeah. Sometimes I look at them, they don't look like they're playing in tandem. You know, I don't know if there's a little bit of needle going on or whatever it is, but the top and bottom of it is when you find yourself in that position, when you come to May, if you've done things right between each other, you're going to win the major prizes anyway. So it's not about me coming away and getting myself a hat-trick and the team losing 3-2. It's about us combinating, winning the game and then getting 3 points for the team. Like I said, sometimes I look at them, it's like one's trying to outdo the other. You don't have to. You're a fantastic football team with great players. You know, you all stick together, and like I said, come May, you'll try to win the same things.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the thing for me when I see them, like, would Salah be on 100 goals now if he didn't have that thing within him in terms of trying to score the goals? That's what I mean.
You have to have it.
So when we look at, say, he could have passed it there, he could have done that. Like, in the end, they both end up getting theirs anyway.
Yeah.
And as it stands, it doesn't feel like it cost them games because somehow they'll still manage to score and they'll win games. Because when we look back, not necessarily to the last year, but the prior 2 years, they came away with one league title but nearly had 200 Premier League points. They didn't lose out on the title because Mane didn't pass to Salah or Salah didn't pass to Mane. You know, so I don't see it as being that big a concern because for me, you've got two strikers who will do anything to score goals. They'll throw their bodies at everything. And although, again, it seems simple, not every striker's got that. Not every has got the sort of feel to be in the key area, to go and try and be the difference. And they are still doing stuff for the team. The vast majority of stuff they do is for the team. But for me, if I see a striker that sees the goal and doesn't want to shoot, it's not really for me because I'd rather see one that sees it and will do everything he can to put the ball in the goal.
When we talk about this for Salah, we have to talk about his assist statistics as well, which are very high. But of course, it also calls into play the times when he has gone for goal and it's maybe deflected and then it's ended up in the path of somebody else.
So it is what it is.
We need to sort of represent that in all its truth and all the. But look, there is a relationship. But as you said, they're probably subconsciously weighing up the percentages. You know, what are my chances of scoring from here, and what are the chances if I pass it? And actually, I think I've got a good chance. They back themselves when they're in front of goal.
You have to back yourself when you're in that position. Otherwise, when you're in that position, you question yourself, and you can't afford to question yourself. And like I said, when I watch Salah and he gets in positions to score goals, 9 times out of 10 he hits the target. And if he does hit the target, if he doesn't score, the goalkeeper parries it, and someone else has got to tap in. And that's what football's about. For me, he's created a chance there. Yeah, and like I said, sometimes you look at them and they're not in tandem, but the quality of the three of them, and I've already touched on it, the three of them have got their mojo back this season, and they're going to create havoc. And the goals they've scored already this season, they're proving to everyone, you know, it's going to be a real tough battle to win this Premier League this season.
Yeah, how many attackers do we really know that have got a ton of goals and a ton of assists?
Well, I was thinking, actually, as you both were talking about...
I tell you what, if you grew your hair out, you'd have flicked it.
Because we can talk about Kane last season, but like that's not a normal season for Kane because he tends not to get a ton of assists. So then you look at it, and the one that sticks out,
Jermaine Defoe actually did particularly well. Luis Suarez as well. When he was at Liverpool, I think he worked in tandem with Daniel Sturridge and Raheem Sterling
for a season.
And they were absolutely exceptional. And Suarez, I think that was a big part of the reason why he got the move to Barcelona, because again he was similarly generous with Messi and I forget the other player who was in that front lineup, which is I should be slapping myself in the head for that.
Neymar.
Neymar, thank you.
Neymar, yeah.
MSN.
MSN. But you see, they had that interplay between them that allowed them to score goals, but they had that awareness of where the other was, and they were very, very unselfish, and they were able to rip it up. And that's what I was saying about just, yeah, it's hard to argue because number, and it's fantastic, and he's, you know, elite player. But I just sometimes think, when I watch, it frustrates me, and it's almost a heresy to say it. I'm sitting next to two top Premier League players.
Well,
sometimes it just, you know.
But you see, I think when you get yourself in those positions, you have a split second. You know, you got to make your mind up. Can I squint at someone for tapping, or do I believe in a better position to shoot? And I think sometimes, if you look at Salah, he gets it mixed up at times. Like, what? Why don't you shoot? Because we expect him to shoot, and he tries to squint at someone that gets cut out or whatever. But he gets himself in so many good positions. Yeah, he can do what he wants to do. And watching him now, he's like, well, I'm going to do what I want to do. Yeah, if I squint, I squint. If I don't, I'll shoot and I'll score.
Yeah,
You know?
and to bring in someone else into this debate, Sergio Aguero.
Yeah.
Did you love him for assists?
He's up there as well, yeah.
But no, he doesn't have a ton of assists. And speaking to people who played with him for many years, they said the worst bit about his game was when he needed to lay one on the plate for somebody else. It's almost like he'd do it on purpose to send him to the corner so they can get a goal himself.
But I almost wonder if he isn't with City anymore because of that. Because I think that Guardiola wants a different type of striker, one that's going to link play more, that is not going to be isolated. If you cut the supply line off to him, then they're playing with 10 players because he isn't somebody who's going to drop deep. Kane can drop into the 10. We saw that when he played for England in Spain, and he was laying goals off, and they were ripping Spain apart. I think it was the first win in Spain for goodness knows how long. And Kane is that type of player. Aguero's not, and I think that's the difference between the two types of play, if you like, that you need. Because you mentioned Firmino, and sometimes he's not that influential because he's not your point man. He drops deep to draw defenders out of position and let other players go into that space.
He's a nuisance, Firmino. He's a fantastic player, but he's a nuisance. But you touch on Kane there. I think Kane's very intelligent. He drops in even more so now, because I think he's lost a half a yard of pace. Now, when we're talking about, playing it a little bit longer, trying to run the channel, so to speak, and get 1v1 against a defender, you won't see him do that. So you have the two boys coming off in the wide areas, making those runs.
Exactly.
I think now we're talking about Kane, it's the time to kind of touch on Manchester City not having that traditional style number 9. And look, Pep Guardiola has done this before. He's had success without, your traditional. I know he's got Jesus, but your more traditional number 9. He's done this before, so it's not about questioning whether they can do it. It's more about asking if the fact that he went so strongly for Kane and that didn't come off suggests that maybe he thinks that they need that player.
I think, and this might be a controversial opinion, I think if City's season hinged on them bringing in Harry Kane, they would have spent whatever the money was going to be to bring in Harry Kane. That's how I see it, because, like I was saying to Andy before, like with the Harry Kane saga in terms of how it fit in with Manchester City, it almost felt like a game show where City were at the podium and they had Harry Kane there, and then they answered a question wrong and they lost him, but they never had him. So what they do have is the team that won the Premier League last season, the team that won the League Cup, got to the FA Cup semi-final, made it to the Champions League final, plus Jack Grealish. If that is not what you'd call a broken system as such, so as a consequence, we're still seeing, it's like we all pictured Harry Kane wearing Man City shirts. It's like, I can't believe they lost him in the summer. Like, Harry Kane was never there. We never saw how he'd fit into the team. But one thing I'll have to say, like as somebody who's invested a bit of time into watching City games in the last year or so, some of the performances they've put out in key moments have been as good as I've seen in my lifetime. And some of those have come without a number 9. So my foundation is one whereby now I would love to have seen somebody replace Sergio Aguero, but I totally understand why they don't have one. Every time I see a City team now that doesn't have a 9 in it, doesn't even. A year ago, it's a different matter, but now, it is what it is.
I think, I'll be brutally honest, if Manchester City had, when he was obviously at Barcelona, had Etu, and when he was at Bayern, Lewandowski, I think if he had one of those now, Oh dear me.
I think for me, I think for the players who are going around now, I think Kane's like a great player and all that stuff. But the one who, if they could ever afford it and if they ever wanted it, that would make a big difference would be Haaland.
Yeah, because he's different.
He's different. Like he can play into the City system, but then he can also offer such a massive threat in behind.
Because he's young and he's got the legs to do that.
And people will play against him in a different manner because they will always be wary. Because as you watch him in the Bundesliga, he's pushing people out of the way, he's charging past people, he's finishing, he's doing everything. He's the link man. And I think he, for me, is him and like Mbappe, obviously, but they're the players who make significant difference. And I think they would make City, in my opinion, like significantly better, whereas somebody else might offer them another option.
It's interesting you say that because Tim Sherwood was in last week and he said he didn't feel that Pep Guardiola necessarily wanted a striker. He wanted Harry Kane in that position. He wanted somebody that good. If now it's we want Haaland and we maybe have to wait a year for him, then that's what we'll do, because just bringing in a striker isn't going to offer us enough. We want the best.
Yeah, I think that Nathan touched on it there. Grealish. He wanted him. Man City did everything they could do to get him. 100 million, there you go. With Kane, yeah, there was loads of talk that he wanted him, but he never pushed the boat out to give Tottenham 120 or 140, whatever it is. So like you just touched on there, he's actually sitting around saying, OK, next season, Haaland's going to come about. We virtually know what the price is, because they're going to know what the price is. I'll stick it all on red next season. And I'll try and get him. And he would make a difference, because like I said, he's young, he's powerful, he's energetic, he scores goals and he creates chances, and he'd be a nightmare for defenders.
Yeah, do you not feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm missing the point here, I don't know the sort of like boardroom type conversations that are being had, but I constructed a deal that could have brought Harry Kane to City if literally the season hinged upon it.
Every as you know, football, there's a capability of doing a deal for whatever player you want, if you really want that individual. And that's football. You know, if you look at some of the transfer fees now, that's because you want an individual.
Yeah. And that's just goes to show, I think, anyway, it's the balance itself. City aren't coming off a terrible season. They're coming off probably the best season that they've had. So with that being said, like, you know, you want to bring somebody in. You don't have to bring somebody in. And, like, it breaks my heart to say it, but, like, Sergio Aguero's, like, probably one of the best City players ever. But last season they didn't need him. And that says a lot about where the team was at that moment.
Yeah, and there's also an argument that someone like Haaland would fit City's profile. He matches up much more readily with players that they've brought in under this regime, more so than Harry Kane.
Yeah, and his dad's played for them as well, so he's got that sort of history as well. And like Harry Kane is a fantastic player. You know, it I almost get tired of having to say that before I say the next thing. But like, looking at Haaland now, you can see that football has a significant future with him in it, because he feels like he's a game changer. The same way we felt about Mbappe maybe 3-4 years ago. That's how it feels with Haaland now. And if that sort of player could come into the Premier League and to come into a Man City of sorts, I think he's a game changer. Yeah.
Having said all that, without Kane or Haaland in the squad, still going to cause Liverpool's backline some trouble, aren't they?
Yeah, of course. They're a very good team. There's no guarantee they'll score. There's also not guaranteed. There's no guarantee they'll score, but in the same breath they could score 4 or 5. Because they have people in their team who are all capable of scoring. And instead of having a team whereby this is the only person that will score, say the team against Chelsea, I think it was, anyone in the front three could have scored. The 2 10s behind could have scored. Even Rodri's chipped in with a goal now. They score goals from set pieces, so the 2 centre-backs could have scored. Cancelo scored a goal from outside the box. Edison could probably kick it 100 yards. So the only person that's not really dangerous is like Kyle Walker.
Watch him score.
With all due respect to him, But
he's just switched off now.
Exactly. Sorry, Kyle. But that's the strength that they have, and they're all capable of doing it. So, as I say, they'll test any backline. Liverpool's is obviously very good, but no backline is perfect. And the same goes for Man City. The same way you saw Brentford take it to Liverpool and score 3, they possibly could have scored maybe a couple more as well. And that's football. That's why we love watching it, because nothing is set in stone. This versus that doesn't have to equal whatever. Anything is possible with the quality on the field there as well, and the sort of contrasting styles. It makes for a cracker.
Yeah, any result really. I mean, I know you were saying, I don't really want to call it, but I think it's going to be a draw. But pretty much any result wouldn't be a huge surprise in this, would it?
No, it wouldn't be. If you've naturally, we've all watched the game over previous years as well. Some of the results that come out, you've left yourself scratching your head. You turn and say to yourself, where did that actually come from? Because the games have been so entertaining, And then all of a sudden, there's been a goal. I'm not going to say a goal comes at the wrong time, because a goal usually comes at the right time for whatever team is. And it's changed the whole game. Whole dynamics of the game have changed. You know, Liverpool have gone on to win, or Manchester City have gone on to win. But what, like I said before, what I do enjoy about this game, they go for the throat straight away. There's no messing about. You know, there's no warming up. Yeah, it's like dominant straight away. I'm going to be the dominant one here, and I'm going to win the game. And that's why I've enjoyed watching this game over numerous years now.
Yeah, should be a good one on Sunday between